Welcome, and in this lecture we're going to start to zoom down from these kind of larger time cycles and structures that we were just looking at and really start to get grounded more in our day-to-day existence. So while our lives might be couched, within these larger realities, and they kind of give us a place for where we are in the larger picture of things. It's really in starting, where we are in this moment on a day-to-day basis and a moment-to-moment basis, that where any really radical shifts can happen slowly or quickly sometimes within our daily lives. So within this lecture, we're primarily going to look at the movement of the doshas over the course of a day, as well as daily routines as outlined by the ancient Shastras. And then in our next lectures, we'll look at some of the Jyotish principles in which we can order daily cycles in our lives according to planetary considerations. And that'll lead us into the Panchang and the Muhurta and all these other kind of interesting things that Jyotish can give us with which to plan and organize. So a lot of this stuff, while it is esoteric, it also has a lot of really practical, useful day-to-day uses to it that you can work with in your own life and kind of see it in action, and it's really, really amazing when it starts clicking. The basic routines we're going to be giving you here, it's going to give you a lot to work with and apply over the course of this module. So even if the information that's being given here, some of it you may have seen, especially the Dinacharya, while it may be simple, it's also really important to watch it at work in order to apply it and understand it more and more. These are basic principles that can often be brushed over, but they're very central and core, especially to Ayurveda and setting up, the baseline of our health and our lives. So they really shouldn't be taken lightly. Don't just brush them over. And also at the same time, don't get too excited and feel like you have to do too much either. Okay, so there's always more, and I've tried to keep it to what's the basics and what's really important here. Now, the doshas and the gunas of how they change over time. So in order to do this, we need to really understand the movement over the course of the day, to understand what's predominating at different portions of the day, and this is going to help us to understand why certain activities and certain protocols are recommended within the Ayurvedic literature. So now we see here that the doshas, they cycle through once during the day and once during the night. And this is just a basic template based on the sunrise sunset time of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., which this layout's pretty common, and you're going to need to temper this knowledge though to the specific sunrise sunset per the seasons, which I'll show you an example of that in the next slide, and how it shifts things a bit. But looking here, we can see that Vata predominates in the later part of the night between 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And so this time is, as well as with other doshas too, you'll see that these are crucial times when often you'll see various disorders that are attributed to each dosha might manifest at that time. So for example, often with this time, people with insomnia will wake up during this time of night, or for people with pitta disorders, gastritis might flare up. And so like this, it can serve as a template with which to organize not only our activities, but some of this can also work as a diagnostic clue, and seeing what's provoking certain problems, certain issues we might have. And it's just one of many diagnostic clues, but it's interesting to watch these shifts. So it's this last portion of the night and the Vata time that is one of the most important times. That is, it's recommended to wake up during this time before sunrise, which we're going to look at shortly in the Dinacharya routine. But you can see here that it's that last quarter of each of these periods ruled by the doshas. That's also a transitioning period between each dosha, where both of them have some effects at play. And so it's really in this portion that the Brahma Muhurta is portion, that last section of the Brahma Muhurta, and where we see a switch over to the Kapha element that really predominates when after the sun rises. And so now it's for this reason that one should really try to rise early, at least an hour and a half before sunrise. Some texts recommend up to 3 hours, which is good if you have a lot of sadhana that you do, which is a couple hours of sadhana is actually not that big of a deal for any real practitioner. Meditation or something like that. It's a kind of a basic amount of time to just start to get into a practice, really, and which is a lot for householders, I realize, but at least try to get some time, if not Brahma Muhurta time, which is definitely recommended. Try to do at least a little bit at sunset as well, just to make up the difference, but at least a couple hours a day of some sadhana, if you want to start to see some progression in any of this stuff, is kind of essential, and on a daily level. So all this stuff we're talking about should be done on a daily event as much as possible. But anyway, so it's one of this reason for this kapha switching over at that turning point of the day, that one should really rise early and do their morning routines and exercises to really take advantage of the lightness in the environment at this time. As well, we do other things such as defecating this time, as when the extra kapha element really comes into the environment, those heavy, slow kind of qualities. It can make a bowel movement not readily accessible after sunrise, and it's all the harder also to wake up properly and feel properly rested and get properly energized for the rest of the day if kapha is predominating. So you're kind of working against that kapha energy if you do wake up later. And we have to take into account when you go to sleep too, which we will in a minute, but in general, this is a big reason why this is recommended within Ayurveda. It's also for this reason too, because kapha is predominating, that it's good to eat a light meal for breakfast, nothing too heavy, which is often been the common advice given over the course of years, or even eat no meal at all if you're actually not defecating properly or not hungry, which you really need to check in with to make sure you're hungry, which is something a lot of us don't do, but it's really basic Ayurvedic protocol. Really basic, but even something that simple, to just skip a meal or eat lighter or less when you're not hungry. Don't eat the same portions if you don't feel you need that. To really start to pay attention and become sensitive to that is really huge. So you're not an autopilot with regards to your meals. There's a day-to-day awareness, an energy, an awareness of the energy in your body and how it's shifting that can really take you into the world. A lot of people who do practice yoga and stuff, a lot of the practice is on the mat. And, if they talk about bringing yoga into the world, it's often, some kind of emotional, psychological, kind of quasi-spiritual motifs that, I doubt they really understand deeply. But Ayurveda is a little more practical in that it can start to make you aware of what you're doing to your body on a moment-to-moment basis, which totally ties into with how getting you more in touch with the subtle energetics of your body for when you do step on the mat, and bringing you deeper into that practice. So it's it all goes together, and it's all good and all really important to get grounded in, even if it seems simple. So you'll see here too, we switch to Pitta time within the middle of the day, and it's at this time when it's taught that we have the highest digestive function, and when we should be able to eat our largest meals as well. So we should get the bulk of our nutrition for the day in the middle of the day. And this is also an auspicious time within Vedic astrology also, which is called Abhijit. And this is when the sun is actually precisely directly overhead within the 10th house. The 10th house also is called the directional strength, which you should be familiar with now from the astrology lessons, but that's where the sun gets its directional strength. And so this is seen as a good kind of general muhurta or auspicious time. So if you need to start any activity or do any activity in a day and you haven't sat down and done all the calculations and checked the other things, which we'll be covering in the next couple lectures, in a pinch, you can use this Abhijit time, and whatever endeavor you're undertaking will basically go as well as you have within the your power to do so, and all the other things that have to be taken into account. But in a pinch, this is a good time to initiate an activity or project. And that principle is also used in different things within just general horoscopy as well. Seeing forth from the sun and things like this, which is more principles. But in general, when the sun's directly overhead, good time to do various things. So after that Pitta time, then we move into the Vata time, the second cycle of Vata, which is in the later part of the day, and that Vata starts to as the sun starts to set, a little coolness comes in the air, and it disperses the day. And after that, we move into the second, that Kapha phase of the day, where once again the heavy air qualities predominate. And it's not the most ideal time now, once again, for a large meal, just like in the morning. And for this reason, dinner should also be lighter for proper balance. And once again, this is all tempered by seasonal adjuncts depending on what exactly is considered a light or heavy meal. But once you get that down as well, when we cover it, you have to play that into effect as well within the timing cycles. One should also sleep before this second Pitta shift happens in the nighttime, that general 10 to 2 a.m. Shift, as this is really the primary time when the body can digest anything that's happened to you in the previous day, whether that's physical things or emotional, psychological things through dreams and everything else, which is actually one of the largest reasons for sleep. But it helps the body to replenish itself and the tissues to rest. So if that's not happening at this time, and it won't happen if we stay up all night, or even if we push past into that Pitta hour. It's also for this reason that staying up late can actually induce not only Vata-related diseases and start to bring away some of the tissues, but it can also vitiate the blood and Pitta disorders as well. And so you'll also notice at this time is when people often get what's called a second wind at night. And this is particularly for Pitta and creative workaholic types who really love to work late into the night, and so they're really able to sustain themselves well at this time, and easily once they get to that time and start kicking in, and that'll move them well into the Vata hour or beyond, depending on their personal constitution and nature. So important to kind of watch that window there. And then after that Pitta cycle, obviously the Vata continues again, and we go through a cycle of the day. So that's the basic cycle, the doshas, and you'll see this time and time again other places. It's pretty common. Notice too the transition periods, which isn't often shown out there. So just a little detail to kind of observe in your effects. But like this, you can see that the cycles are throughout the day. And while we're often thrown to the dictates of our work and our day-to-day world, it would really be ideal to try and create some kind of schedule around the movement of these doshas as much as possible. At the very least, you want to follow the dictates of the morning routine, which will help to set up a stable kind of outlook and trajectory as you move into the day around the Brahma Muhurta. And this is something which is within the reach of most of us. And this is a time too when we're least likely to be disturbed during the Brahma Muhurta, unless you have children, which is anything's fair game there. But like I do, but it's still a time when the world's at bay. So this is really probably the best time that you can definitely be alone, be quiet. The world is rested, and it's just a very special time. Most of us may also have a lot of control over the later part of the day, more towards sleeping time, after dinner time as well. to take advantage of. However, after that time, that's generally a better time for doing, practices to balance our health, to restore our health, maybe a more little active, asana practice, something to kind of slug off the excesses of the day, or even a restorative practice if, your nervous system is shot like a lot of people. So in the later part of the day, there's not quite as much focus generally. So it is an option though. But you have to be careful, once again, not to push it into the Pitta time or push yourselves too far, and really consider that sound sleep routine, once again, one of those pillars of health, along with our diet and our sexual routines that Ayurveda is founded on. So really try to, get that good quality sleep in there. Now, to look at a little example of the time differential depending on seasons, we can see here, these basic templates have to be adjusted for sunrise, sunset, for your own personal areas. Now, in those in really higher northern latitudes or southern latitudes, this gets pretty warped. So I don't know of, and I don't have any clinical info for how this really affects people, so I can't speak to it as much. But from a Jyotish perspective, I do know that we're aware of this type of setup, and there's actually different charts you can use to see how this affects a person, and it definitely has a shift in the mental and emotional lives, and it plays into how society affects one. As if it's light or dark out day all night, that's going to affect how society functions greatly, and in fact how that affects your mind. So we see that generally through the Bhava Chalita chakra, which we may or may not cover later, but it's definitely there in the text. Although my Ayurvedic studies, I don't know of deeper knowledge about these shifts. So if anybody out there has any pointers on that, I'd be curious. But for the most part, that those radical shifts don't influence most of us for where we're living on the globe. Nonetheless, let us say, back to the example at hand, that in wintertime, the sun rises at 7 a.m. and would set at 5 p.m. for your local as an average for a winter time. And this gives us a day of about 10 hours and a nighttime of about 14 hours there. So, you can do the math there. I've laid it out. So, you can divide the 10 hours a day by 3, which will give you 3 hours, 20 minutes, and then a quarter of that, about 50 minutes is a shift. So you see Kapha time is about 7 a.m. to 10:20, and the transition from, that 9:30 time on, and then Pitta times from 10:20 to about 1:40 and so on, and Vata time from 1:40 to about 5 p.m. here. And now you can compare this to the summer, which, we can just flip those times so that, let's say a 6 a.m. rising time, 8 p.m. setting time, and that gives us, the flip on that, which is 14 hours of day, 10 hours of night. So, 6 a.m. to 10:40 for Kapha again, 10:40 to 3:20 for Pitta, and 3:20 to 8 p.m. for Vata. So, we see some shifts there, some windows opening, a little more time for the middle of the day in the summertime, a little less within the winter time. However, once again, in the winter, we do have higher digestive function. But in general, even if you do plan your days around the doshas, the shifts aren't so extremely radical that you can't kind of maneuver it. It can get a little hairy within the deeper solstice times when it's really, the times are a little whacked out, especially with daylight savings times and all this. But this just gives you a general idea for how that's working. But it does also show, there's a little bit more leeway for later sleep time in the summer, which is also a time, actually, when we can have naps in the middle of the day to restore our body, while winter is perhaps a better time to kind of go to bed early, rise a little earlier, as this is a best time to be active, actually, time of the year, which is often difficult to do. But if you use this, you can get that in there. And the interesting thing, too, about this is that large nighttime really makes, with that early sleep, makes it ideal for sadhana, which is the nature of many of the, winter solstice celebrations that celebrate really that light within us, versus this kind of darkness without, that darkness of the outer world. Finding that light within is really what all these kind of solstice, Christmas, Diwalis around this time. So all these things really have that same energy behind them. And then once again, the times in between those winter solstices are moderate, not as drastic. Whereas in the summer, then we have that shift to where there's more light out. It's more taxing on the body, and everything that ensues. So something to watch out for, but not really that difficult. We're also often living by clock time, so we're not with nature. We're watching that clock, and we're not thinking about these shifts in sun, even though we may notice them on the periphery. It often takes a little bit of awareness of watching the sun, the times, and how that's moving and shifting within ourselves and our routines to really stay with it properly. So something to watch out for, and it'll help you get in a little more in touch too if you take into consideration these nuances of time.